Latest news on China's economy shows a slight improvement, but huge problems remain. China's military budget is 3 times bigger than believed. Is the US ready? Xi Jinping's diplomacy turned from offensive to defensive? It's all covered in today's China Truths. Latest news on China's economy shows a slight improvement, but huge problems remain. China's economy improved in August, but it was not enough to change the overall picture of decline. China still faces tremendous economic headwinds, some as a legacy of past mistakes, some stemming from growing hostility in the West and Japan, and some resulting from serious demographic problems. Even if things have improved somewhat since last spring and early summer, and that is by no means certain, these impediments will prevent China from recapturing anything near its former economic momentum. Mr. Milton Ezrati, the chief economist for Vested, a New York-based communications firm, presented his own analysis of China's current economic situation and how we should interpret the latest economic news. The bomb of good news arrived in several spheres. Retail sales rose in August by some 4.6% above August last year. That figure exceeds by quite a margin the 3% growth of consensus expectations and the 2.5% figure recorded for July. Industrial production also picked up, expanding in August 4.5% above year-ago levels, above the consensus expectation of 3.9% and the July figure of 3.7%. Value added from manufacturing came in 5.4% above year-ago figures in August, with the production of solar cells and service robots up more than 70% from a year ago. Banks reported a pickup in demands for loans, while urban unemployment edged down to 5.2% of the workforce in August from 5.3% in July. Though an improvement over the recent past, this news does little to erase the abiding fundamental problems facing China. Residential real estate is the most immediate. Under past government guidance, housing across China had been horribly overbuilt, with residential real estate development rising at times to some 30% of the nation's gross domestic product. In the process, real estate development firms had become highly leveraged, so when Beijing, a couple or 3 years ago, pulled back on promoting such activity, the firms involved began to collapse. At each failure, homebuyers and lenders, who had depended on these developers to meet their obligations, found themselves in financial trouble and unable to maintain former levels of spending and economic activity. What is more, the accompanying fall in real estate values drew down the net worth of Chinese households at all income levels, making all reluctant to spend, a fact that has become increasingly evident despite the recent improvement in consumption statistics. Nor is there any sign that the pressure is lifting. New home starts for the first 8 months of this year have fallen 23% from year-earlier levels, while home prices have fallen in 52 of China's 70 major cities, up from the 49 recorded in July. At the same time, capital investment, long a mainstay of China's economy, continues to lag. Fixed investment in new facilities and equipment grew only 3.2% this August over August a year ago, lower than the consensus expectation of 3.3% growth and slower than July's 3.4%. The figure would have been that much lower except that Beijing is pushing infrastructure spending through state-owned businesses as well as local and provincial governments. Capital spending by private businesses continues declining, falling 0.7% below year-ago figures in the year through August, a downward acceleration from the 0.5% recorded for the year through July and 0.2% recorded for the year through June. In an oblique recognition of the severity of this problem, the People's Bank of China has tried to free up funds for capital investing by cutting the percentage of cash banks need to hold by some 0.25 percentage points. Lurking behind these more immediate problems is the decision by Western and Japanese businesses to transfer their sourcing away from China, mostly to elsewhere in Asia and Latin America. While Beijing talks incessantly about making China more self-sufficient economically, the nation's prosperity and wealth still depend significantly on foreign sourcing and exporting. Demographics present a still more fundamental economic problem. Decades of low birth rates in China increasingly deny the economy a supply of youthful workers to replace the large generation of workers now retiring. Compounding this problem is how China's continued dependence on manufacturing for export and inability to develop a sophisticated service economy has denied employment opportunities to millions of Chinese university graduates, wasting their talents and denying the economy returns on the resources used to educate them. August's run of good economic news has prompted many media outlets to declare that China will, after all, meet its 5% real growth target for 2023. That might actually occur, but ultimately, hitting the target means little. The more important point by far is that Beijing had to reduce its target in the first place. It is far below, by half, in fact, the growth pace that has typified China during most of the last 40-some years. Most important of all is that China can expect much slower growth for some time to come. So, despite the recent good news, China's economy is still facing huge problems. According to an expert, the biggest problem is losing hope. Mr. Chen Buji, the honorary chairman of a Taiwanese think tank, said that China's economy is stalling, real estate is losing funds, and politics is losing prospects. A large number of young people are unemployed, and losing hope is becoming the biggest problem. Mr. Chen Buji is a well-known economist who once served as the chairman of the Taiwan Council for Economic Development and is currently the counselor of the presidential office. On September 25, Mr. Chen Buji said in an exclusive interview with Central News Agency that China's economic bubble-like development once brought hope to people, and many people invested fully, but now the bubble cannot be sustained. At present, China does not have a problem of insufficient savings rate, but a reduction in the power to drive confidence and investment. Especially in the past few years, the accumulated private debt and government debt at all levels have been extremely high, limiting the ability to convert savings into investment. China has long had the advantages of low wages, low labor insurance conditions, low environmental protection requirements, and a large population. It has received great development opportunities under the trend of global trade liberalization and investment. Now, the economy is stalling, coupled with competition from lower-cost countries and Western resistance to its technology and equipment. The impact is particularly wide. In addition, the youth unemployment rate officially announced by the Communist Party of China exceeds 20%, and the real rate may be even higher. This phenomenon not only indicates poor economic conditions and prospects, but is also likely to cause more serious social and political unrest. On August 15, the Statistics Bureau of the Communist Party of China announced that it will no longer publish the youth unemployment rate starting from August this year. Previously, the youth unemployment rate continued to rise, reaching 17.3%, 18.1%, 19.6%, 20.4%, 20.8% and 21.3% respectively from January to June. Since April, it has exceeded the 19.9% in July 2022, setting new highs since statistics were collected in 2018. Mr. Chen Buji believes that the rising unemployment rate and declining economic growth rate have caused young people to lose hope. The low growth rate and the international situation have disappointed domestic and foreign investors. The possibility of Xi Jinping monopolizing power for a long time has also made many people who yearn for freedom and democracy or want to compete for power disappointed. Losing hope is becoming China's biggest problem. China's military budget is 3 times bigger than believed. Is the U.S. ready? Mr. Antonio Gracefo, Ph.D., is a China economic analyst who has spent more than 20 years in Asia. In his article, China's Hidden Defense Budget, published September 26, Mr. Gracefo presented an analysis about the real defense budget of China. Chinese leader Xi Jinping's objective for the People's Liberation Army, PLA, is to achieve military superiority over the United States by 2050. Achieving this goal is directly predicated on the amount of money the two nations spend on defense. Previously, it was believed that China was spending $224.79 billion, a fraction of the U.S. military's budget of $857.9 billion. However, the U.S. intelligence community recently discovered that China may be spending as much as $700 billion, allowing China to challenge the United States for military supremacy much sooner than originally believed. This new revelation has lawmakers concerned. One of the ways Beijing disguised its spending was by directing money into the military-civil fusion, whereby the central government provides money to private companies to develop dual-use technology. Some of the most critical areas of military development, such as shipbuilding, information technology, and aerospace, are funded in this way. These three domains are expected to play the largest role in any war between the United States and China. A special danger regarding information technology and aerospace is that the ability to dominate cyberspace or damage or disable satellites will be crucial in 21st century warfare. It could leave ships and planes unable to navigate or communicate, or prevent the United States from guiding its missiles to targets. China's Coast Guard and People's Armed Forces Maritime Militia are not covered by the defense budget. These two forces have been aggressively pushing the Chinese Communist Party's (CCP) territorial claims in the South China Sea, as well as conducting spying in the Bay of Bengal. They carry weapons and enforce Beijing's foreign policy objectives but are not considered part of the PLA Navy. China is one of the 5 largest arms importers in the world. During the past 5 years, China's arms imports have been rising, with 83% coming from Russia. China primarily imports weapons and technology that cannot be produced domestically, such as long-range strike capabilities, combat aircraft, and missiles. These imports do not count in Beijing's official defense spending figures. Research and development are other large expenditures not charged to the country's defense budget. Purchasing power parity is another reason why China's spending may be amplified. Because labor and many basic products and services are much cheaper in China than in the United States, Beijing can buy more of them with a smaller budget. Soldiers' salaries are much higher in the United States than in China. A private in the PLA has a starting salary of $108 per month. In the U.S. Army, it is $1,918. On a similar note, the United States has been plagued by inflation, with prices increasing by an average of nearly 18% since the Biden administration began. China, by contrast, is facing deflation. While prices are going up in the United States, they are going down in China, making it possible for the CCP to buy more goods and services for the PLA. China ranks among the world's 5 largest arms exporters. Although China's defense budget has increased steadily, year after year, China's arms exports have been in decline. Last year, China's weapons exports dropped by 23%. Russia surpassed China as the primary arms dealer in Africa. Europe, the part of the world that has seen the greatest increase in arms purchases, buys most of its overseas weapons imports from the United States. One reason for this may be that China is stockpiling weapons in preparation for war. The PLA Navy and PLA Air Force have increasingly threatened the sea and airspace around Taiwan. In response, the United States is strengthening its defense ties with Taiwan, India, Australia, and other nations. The U.S. Department of Defense has stated that it is trying to prevent a war in the Indo-Pacific region but wants to be ready if war breaks out. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said that the increase in the U.S. defense budget this year was driven by the seriousness of our strategic competition with the People's Republic of China. Now, it appears that China is spending more than originally believed. The stakes have been raised. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, in a September 19 statement, recognized the grave importance of stepping up U.S. preparations for a possible war with China. He called for more military spending, saying that closing the gap with China, and outcompeting our biggest strategic adversary, will require more than innovation theater or speeches about revolutions in military affairs. Real progress will require real investments in long-range strike capabilities. Real expansion of our defense production capacity. Real defense technology cooperation with our closest allies who increasingly share our concerns about the PLA. Xi Jinping's diplomacy turned from offensive to defensive? U.S. media The Diplomat last week published an analysis, pointing out that Chinese leader Xi Jinping's diplomatic policy is shifting from offense to defense. According to the analysis, Yan Jianli, founder and president of Citizen Power Initiatives, said that Xi seems to be deciding his time is better spent focused on shoring up the regime's security at home as he faces diplomatic headwinds. Yang took an example that, while U.S. President Joe Biden has repeatedly expressed his willingness to meet with Xi, there has been no definitive response from China. On September 4, China's Ministry of State Security published an article outlining the conditions for a meeting between Biden and Xi. The article stated that, in order to truly realize the meeting between Xi Jinping and Joe Biden at the APEC summit in Bali last October and again at the summit in San Francisco this November, the United States must show sufficient sincerity. It is unusual for a security or intelligence agency of a country to interfere in decisions on such high-level matters even if it is involved in diplomatic affairs. It is even more unusual for the Ministry of State Security to publicly comment on the most critical current international affairs of China's most important international relations. The ministry's unusual move has so far gone largely unnoticed by the international media. Under Xi's leadership, Chinese officials certainly dare not act recklessly, let alone overstep their bounds. So this means Xi Jinping may direct the security services led by his longtime confidant Chen Yixin, the Minister of National Security, to participate in diplomatic affairs. Yang said that this move indicates some changes in the Chinese leader's diplomatic approach. Letting the high-profile involvement of the national security apparatus in diplomatic affairs means Xi is putting national security at the center of his diplomatic policy. In other words, he is integrating diplomacy into his national security framework. For Xi Jinping, the concept of national security mainly includes the security of his personal power, followed by the security of the Chinese Communist Party's rule, and the security of what he considers China's core national interests in international relations. According to Yang Jianli, Xi is seen obsessing with security awareness. Though he realizes that economic prosperity is the most important pillar of the CCP's legitimacy, and it is under pressure, he continues to implement security policies that restrict market freedoms against Chinese private entrepreneurs and foreign investors. It actually has a negative impact on China's economy. The nationwide anti-spying campaign he launched has made every Chinese citizen feel unsafe when interacting with foreigners, including ordinary individuals. National security is at its core a defensive concept, and embedding diplomacy into the national security framework almost certainly indicates that Xi Jinping's foreign policy approach is likely to shift from an offensive to a defensive posture in the foreseeable future. There are signs that Xi feels the current diplomatic environment poses a threat to his political security and the Chinese Communist Party as well. About a decade ago, Xi told then U.S. President Barack Obama that China was the target of a color revolution. In September 2022, at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Uzbekistan, he called on member states to help each other prevent foreign forces from inciting color revolutions. Yang said that, by blaming U.S. containment for China's faltering economy, Xi is seeking to prevent dire economic conditions from undermining his rule and reigniting nationalism to consolidate his power. Xi Jinping's strategy for China-U.S. relations is like two sides of a coin. On the one hand, it is to thwart the penetration of Western ideas, information and bad money from the United States into China. On the other hand, it is to defeat the United States in the global struggle between superpowers. But now, or at least for now, Xi chooses not to focus on aggressiveness in overseas affairs. It may be the reason Xi did not attend the G20 summit in India on September 9 to 10, instead sending Premier Li Qiang to represent him. He also did not attend the Eastern Economic Forum hosted by Russia President Vladimir Putin in Vladivostok City on September 12. It is also not sure if he will attend the APEC summit in San Francisco this fall and meet with Biden. So far this year, the Chinese leader has made just 2 trips abroad, far below his pre-COVID pandemic period. This indicates Xi's shift away from the active diplomacy seen during his first decade in power. Xi has recently encountered a lot of insurmountable challenges in diplomacy. The United States has been actively expanding and strengthening its alliances with Indo-Pacific allies and partners, including Japan, South Korea, India, Vietnam, the Philippines, Australia, and even Mongolia. This is equivalent to a strategy to curb the expansion of the CCP. China's long-term strategic engagement with ASEAN is also strained by Beijing's release of a new standard map of the country. In addition, the Belt and Road Initiative, China's flagship international infrastructure project, faces a setback. Italy decided to withdraw from its agreement with China. Meanwhile, a U.S.-backed trade route linking India, the Middle East and Europe was set up at the recent G20 summit, challenging China's global ambitions. Even Xi's proudest diplomatic achievements, such as the expansion of the BRICS, are overshadowed by India's increasingly apparent success in competing with China for leadership of the global South. A series of diplomatic obstacles and difficulties may make Xi Jinping realize that the marginal returns of his diplomatic offensive efforts are too low at the moment, and it may be more important to focus on consolidating existing positions to make China stronger. However, that doesn't mean he intends to give up on his global ambitions. Don't forget to leave a comment in the section below to share your opinions on today's topic with us. Make sure to like and subscribe to see more interesting topics from China Truths.